Here is the question. Do you think the narcissistic epidemic can be resolved by prioritizing creating happy childhoods? Not as in full of instant gratification, but empowering them and to encourage kids to follow curiosity and empathy more than riches or attention. I like the sentiment. I like the direction. Certainly what I would say is if we had different priorities in our culture and we lived in a different way, we wouldn't see the explosion of narcissism that we're seeing now, and that the explosion of narcissism and narcissistic traits, if not full-blown narcissistic personality disorder, because certainly narcissistic traits are exploding. NPD, I'm not convinced by the data that I've seen so far that full-blown NPD is exploding, but a narcissistic style and a narcissistic way of living, absolutely. Could it be resolved by creating happy childhoods? I wouldn't go the way that you've gone with that, which is you said prioritizing a happy childhood. I think we already prioritize happy childhoods, and that's actually creating more narcissism. I will explain. I'm being deliberately provocative. We're already prioritizing happy childhoods, and this is creating narcissism. And then you said empowering children to follow curiosity and empathy more than riches or attention. Okay, number one, I don't know if you saw the Jordan Peterson-Slavoj Žižek debate, but one of the places where they agreed in their debate, which was on capitalism, Marxism, and happiness, is that happiness is not a particularly useful category. Now, again, try and hear what I'm saying, because some people, when I talk to them about this, they have like a gut level response and they think I'm trying to make children miserable. What I'm trying to say is that for children and for adults, we should probably let go of happy. It's good for you to occasionally feel joy. It's good for you to be cheerful. It's good to be optimistic. But I think there is no faster way of creating broad scale misery than by prioritizing happiness as though it were a value to be pursued. Wowie. Similarly, and just as provocatively, I don't think that it is ultimately wise to prioritize equality as a value to be pursued. My God. That sounds like this man is a tyrant and he wants to create a miserable, tyrannical world full of hierarchies of dominance. No. What I'm actually saying is we as the entity that we are, the ultimate reality of what human beings are, is if, say there's 100 of us in a room. Okay, you're a psychologist. Let's do this as like a thought experiment. You're a psychologist, but this is a philosophical thought experiment. There's 100 people in a room. There's 100 men like me sat in chairs in a room. There's 100 of us. And you can program the 100 of us to have different priorities. And then for a year, we're going to pursue whatever priority you program into us. Let's keep it clean. There's 100 clones of Richard. And you can prioritize happiness, you could prioritize sanity, you could prioritize peace, you could prioritize purpose, you could prioritize being content, so on and so forth. You could prioritize these different things. What I think you would find is if we could run this a completely insane sci-fi scenario experiment, is that the clones who were asked to pursue happiness after 12 months would self-report the lowest levels of happiness of all the clones. Because when we try to go for it directly, what does it mean to pursue happiness? What is happiness? Happiness is actually the froth. Happiness is, I would rather say joy. When we say joy, I think linguistically and historically, we all know that joy is momentary. You're not going to live every day 16 hours a day in a state of joy, or use another word, elation, nor should you. I mean, that's mania. That would be weird. And if your baseline is joy, that's not joy anymore. There is no more joy. That's just you. Happiness is a fleeting feeling somatically in the body. You feel good. You have this moment of feeling good. So to entrain people to pursue a momentary feeling of goodness is poison. If you give them purpose, if you ask them to pursue contentment, if you ask them to pursue their values and to work towards goals that are community focused, because remember, happiness is an individual experience. I can't pursue collective happiness. delusional. That's completely delusional. I could pursue collective sanity. I could pursue collective cohesion. I could pursue collective peace or satiation or safety. I can't pursue collective equality any more than I can pursue collective happiness. So these are, the point I'm moving towards here is to say, these are things that at first blush sound good. Do you want people to be happy? Sure. And I would still say, yeah, absolutely. If I could push a button and make people feel more happy more often, I'd push the button. Of course I would. But basically what that would mean is, instead of feeling happy, if it meant the difference between people would momentarily feel joy, instead of 3 times a year, 300 times a year, I'd push that button. But they won't have the experience of feeling joy 300 times a year versus 3 times a year by pursuing happiness. They won't get to the end goal. By pursuing the end goal, they won't get there. How do we as human beings actually get to the end goal of the momentary experience of elation, of joy, of victory, of the sense that we achieved and we accomplished? Well, typically through purpose and progress. That's how we're built. That's the entity that we are. We need purpose, and then we need to feel as though we're making progress. When we feel as though, even if it's tiny little pieces of progress, moving us towards the fulfillment of an end purpose, we feel good more often than we feel bad. So I would actually say that it's the pursuit of trying to feel happy that's creating the narcissism, because it makes us individualistic in the worst sense possible. It doesn't make us individualistic in the sense of being self-reliant. We become individualistic in the sense of being selfish. We become egoic, and then we're reliant on other people to try to make us happy, which then over a long enough timeline, as it plays out from childhood through adolescence into adulthood, makes us exploitative, and it makes us entitled, because we grow up thinking I should be made happy by other people around me, and that actually breeds narcissism. So I would say, yes, if childhoods occurred differently, then yes, there would be less narcissism, but I would go further upstream than you have. I think you've got the right idea. I would do it slightly differently. I would go further upstream and I'd say, well, childhoods would be different if we culturally had different priorities. I mean, the entire education system, in my opinion, should be turned upside down. It should be gutted. It should be terminated as it is, and we should start again. Probably society and culture could do with a little bit of a reset as well, and a bit of a starting again. And if we started again with different objectives, then there wouldn't be this narcissism. The narcissism is always a defense to a stressful, traumatic environment. And sometimes being spoiled is the trauma. Even when we're talking about creating full-blown narcissistic personality disorder, the child has to be spoiled in order for full-blown narcissistic personality disorder to set in. The narcissistic style that we're seeing an explosion of is because people are being spoiled. So they're being over-gratified materialistically and in terms of their vanity and in terms of their power expressions, but they're being under-satiated in terms of the things they really need, which is purpose, which is connection with other people, which is leadership. Look at how we're talking about parents and children and teachers and children right now, but no leaders, no leadership, no role models. Nobody wants to step up and say, live like me, because I don't know, it's just not the moment to do. It's like, it's out of fashion to do that. Say, okay, do it like this. This is the right way to get it done. What's the style right now? Well, you can do whatever you want. Like, what would you like to do? That's traumatic for a child, by the way. For any of us to not give children boundaries and to not tell children no is enormously traumatic for children. But allow me to sound like an old man. I see modern parents now talking to their children, and 9 times out of 10, I'm confused and slightly appalled. I see adults kneeling down in front of 3-year-olds and asking them questions like, what would you like to do? I remember once it happened in London. I was actually on the way to meet Sam Vaknin, as it was. This is years ago. I think it was the first time I met Sam Vaknin in central London. And there was a family had stopped on the sidewalk in the middle of London on the pavement, and they'd created this crowd around them, an entire family of 5 people. So there was a child, 2 parents, and then the grandparents. And they were asking what looked to be a very small boy at the most he was 4 years old. I suspect he was 3. whether he would prefer to ride the bus or go on the underground to their next location. And I was like, why would you do that to yourselves or to the child? He doesn't really care. And he doesn't really understand what you're asking. And it's not really going to add to his well-being or experience or the good memories he has of going to London, being given these options. It's neither here nor there. Just do the thing that's most appropriate and convenient for you. Take him to the next place. He's only going to care if the next place has a slide anyway. He doesn't care where it is. Let's go Buckingham Palace. He's 4. Does it have a slide? Is there a swing there? Because I'm 4. I don't care. I don't care about seeing some ancient historical building. How boring. They don't care. And this, I claim, is a common parenting style. Parents nowadays have been psychologized by people like me, sadly, who've popularized psychology to the point that it's made people completely daft with it. Now everybody thinks that boundaries are bad. No, you shouldn't. I've had clients say to me, we've raised our children without telling them no, and they're proud. We raise our children without telling them no. I'm like, why would you, who told you to do that? Who told you that that was a good thing? And nobody's actually actively told them that, but the implication that they got from psychology and psychologizers and people who frankly talk a load of crap about psychology, the froth, the style of psychology, the flavor that they got of it was telling a child no or imposing a sanction on a child is traumatic and it's a trauma that lasts throughout their whole lives. That is not true. That is false. It is your job as an adult to tell your child no. It is your job as an adult to make decisions for your child. It's not a democracy. When you tell a child you're in charge and they're too young to be in charge for that role, all you're doing is creating stress. They're ready to be led. They're ready to be told what to do. They're perfectly happy with that. Just go ahead and do it. So one of the things that I suspected was there a little bit in the question was, because you mentioned empathy and curiosity. I really don't think that empathy and curiosity are massive priorities for very small children. Empathy and curiosity, I don't know, once the children have got to 13 or like 13, 14-year-olds turn into little narcissistic psychopaths. So yes, they need to probably do empathy exercises and compassion exercises so they're not as mean to each other that they otherwise would be. Curiosity, yeah, be curious. Like we should all be trained to be curious about the world, to be curious about ourselves. I mean, that's good as far as education goes. But the whole system needs to change. The whole value system, I think, needs to be moved around, really. And that includes us. We mustn't divide ourselves as parents, as teachers, as administrators from the system. Children do what we do. They don't do what we say. Children just copy us directly. That is the animal that we are. A human animal, a little human animal, like a little monkey or a little dog or a little duck, looks at the big dog, the big duck, or the big monkey and says, what are they doing? I'll do that. So if you're being indecisive, if you're wringing your hands and flapping over empathy, if you're being hyper-conscientious, too agreeable, saying yes to things you should be saying no to, that's what you're putting into the child. So we've got to be careful we're not, with all this psychologizing and spiritualizing of everything and this effort to be overly virtuous and nicey all the time, that we're not creating a bunch of little wimps and a bunch of little princes and princesses who grow up to believe that life is all about me and my pleasure and my the celebration of me, because you add social media to that mix and it's an absolute nightmare. So I would propose something a little bit more robust and a little bit more collectively focused, where you say, look, you're a part of a family, you're a part of a tribe. The trade-off for your individual pleasure and your individual expression is support, is love, but that is a burden then on adults. Adults have to actually start showing real love and real care for their children, because, final point I'll make on this and then I'll leave it, if I haven't upset the parents enough, this one definitely will. The other thing that's happening in modern parenting is the virtue signaling of being nice and empathic, whilst secretly not really having that much time for the children, and really not knowing what to do with children, really just being at a loss with how to parent and wanting to outsource it. And there's this huge relief. I see it. I'm a sensitive type of person myself. I see the relief in being able to hand over to administrators, teachers, schools, institutions, psychologists, and so on. And then they say, oh, this is how we should do it. And the parent goes, oh, thank God somebody knows what to do, because I'm really struggling here. And I have all the sympathy in the world, by the way, for parents. I think you're receiving a maddening level of contradictory messages about how to be a good parent. So you get people who go, do it like this is absolutely the way to do it. And then you look at their lives or the way they're raising their kids and you go, it's a mess. What is that about? We've got to start having a courageous, honest interaction with the reality that we're facing. Once we're courageous and honest, that is the key element to eradicating narcissism. Narcissism is a kind of cowardice. Narcissism is fundamentally a kind of expression of dishonesty. It's a negation of reality. So if we teach children to be courageous and honest, how do we do that? We model courage and honesty by being courageous and honest and courageously honest in front of them. They'll model that, then we'll see less narcissism. I could have just said that. This video would have been 30 seconds. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and for your attention. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Cheers. Okay, folks, the new course, Unplug from the Matrix of Narcissistic Abuse, is out now. And if you're interested in finding out more about that, please click the link below.